Welcome.
Good to see you.
I mean, how many of these conversations on AI have you been having lately, Khalfan?
So, I mean, first
Every
of
day?
let me first start by saying yes, absolutely every day, but I'll start first by saying it's always an absolute honor to be here in the Kingdom of Bahrain. Great to be with you and the esteemed panelists. Bahrain holds a special link with us in the UAE. I have dear friends here. I'd like to thank His Excellency Sheikh Salman, a fellow Bostonian as well, His Excellency Sheikh Abdullah. And like I said, a special relationship. My mom is from the Kingdom of Bahrain as well. She didn't tell me to say this, but I'm complimenting Bahrain.
Shout out to your mom.
Yes, yes.
Round of applause for Khalfan's mom.
Thank you, thank you. So, like I said, I mean, to your point, AI touches everything. I mean, you name it when it comes to the sectors, and I'm sure we're going to dwell on which sectors it actually touches and how it penetrates, and I have so many stories to talk about it. But the first thing I'll start with is, I mean, if any country says, or any regulator says that they are at par with the drastic change of innovation, I, in my humble opinion, think that this is not a solid statement, because innovation is just advancing in such a fast way that whatever is futuristic today is obsolete in the next couple of weeks. And I think the smartest governments are the governments that will narrow that gap. So there would always be a gap, but if you are a regulator or a government or even the private sector are smart enough to really shrink that gap, then I think you'll be able to embrace AI. AI will touch upon us in many ways and forms, but I think it's all about agility and how you can understand it, embrace it, work closely with the private sector. The private sector is now they're the whole show, basically. Governments, agile governments, are the ones that actually enable that show. Back in the maybe decades, governments used to run the show. It's no longer the case. Governments now enable the show because of the power the private sector has through AI. And I'll wrap up this maybe answer by saying we have 3 big beasts coming in a good way, coming our way, and we haven't even scratched the surface of understanding the magnitude of AI. If we think about the connection of AI and Gen AI, if you will, with supercomputers and quantum computers and fast computers and robotics. Imagine those 3 beasts, again, in a good way, talking to each other and really connecting. This is why we haven't even scratched the surface on the enablement of AI across all sectors. I mean, I can talk for ages and give you so many stories. So give me a break for now, and then we'll go back.
Listen, I love what you said about, things that we're doing today could be obsolete tomorrow. As you were saying this, I was just thinking I'm of the generation that was using cassette tapes, listening to music, and then we transitioned to CDs, and then we transitioned to streaming, and thinking about how that has completely changed, and I wonder what it's going to look like down the line. I mean, we're in the age of fast-moving technology, and I want to take a step back because, Caroline, it's great to have you with us. You're from Google, you're a hardcore engineer, you get things in a different way. So I have to ask this question of where we are in the life cycle of companies adopting AI. In a time where I feel we're the experimental generation, believe it or not, and we don't know how much longer we need to experiment for until we find that sweet spot.
I have, shout out also to the Kingdom of Bahrain. My mother lives in the African continent. She started here in Bahrain in the early 2000s with my stepfather. So she lived here for 8 years and then ended up moving to Saudi, and then now she's in South Africa. So
there's a connection with us
as well. There's a connection for me with the GCC, obviously. And I grew up in Malaysia, so, assalamu alaikum. I grew up in Malaysia. I'm Malay, Chinese, Indian, and Portuguese. Now, what does this have to do with engineering? A lot of the work that we do at Google, as you can imagine, is very much global in nature. And I'm very fortunate that in my position, I actually get to travel the world and actually meet with governments, public policymakers, as well as enterprises such as GSK to understand how they are thinking about AI. Everything from automation, analytics, predictive AI, and now generative AI. As Khalfan said, you said not to call you HE, so I'm okay, right?
Khalfan is good.
All right. So those things are really important. Now, to answer your question on where people are, For people who have not read the book Crossing the Chasm, I highly suggest you do look at it, especially now. In the chasm, we always have the innovators of the chasm. I don't believe that we're even touching 5% of the innovators of the chasm when it comes to the adoption of generative AI and the power of these generative AI models today. That being said, there is a lot of experimentation. There is a lot of healthy experimentation, I might add. But where we're starting to see on the Google Cloud side, we recently announced 185 customers and their use cases in enterprises and how they're using these technologies to actually get business value. And it's everything from internal productivity gains all the way through to external new customer acquisition and even building new economic models, doing business in ways that they couldn't do before by leveraging this technology. Now, that being said, I think a lot of the fear and misunderstanding of what this technology and this innovation can bring, which Khalfan also already covered, is because I think people assume that it's just the technology. It's just all about the engineering aspect. But if you don't understand the human persona who's going to use and leverage these technologies and the societies these technologies can actually help, societies, communities, culture, I've already a mixed bag of culture, as I've mentioned, those things are what make the technology real. Yeah. And so we definitely need more humans in the conversation and not just focusing on it as a technology. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as we're talking about AI, we're also going to get a bit philosophical, by the way, because as I've been having these conversations with some professors, they said, one of the best comments I heard, AI and, ChatGPT and robots and everything we're doing right now is actually going to help us learn about what makes us human. And what makes us human is some of the stories that we shared, because no language models are going to be able to talk about that background. So since we're sharing, I'm from Greece, actually, and I grew up in South Africa, but my dad was a lead mechanic on ships and carrying cargo around the world, and he's been to this region and Bahrain many times. So there's a connection as well. So I hope, John, you've got some stories. A personal one.
I've clearly been invited to the wrong conference because I don't have a family connection to Bahrain, but I do love coming to this region because the ambition levels are so refreshing here.
So I wanted to, healthcare we know is going to be disrupted dramatically, and the incredible work that we're seeing at GSK already. You're focusing on AI to figure out what's going on with diseases, the R&D that you're spending on how AI can help you solve, discovering proteins or whatever you were explaining to me backstage. Take us through what you're doing right now and how already it's changing your life.
Well, let me just step back for a little while, for a moment, because healthcare is one of the most inefficient industries there is. Just think the number of misdiagnoses or errors. Imagine if your bank did that, the level of tolerance. So this is an industry that needs to be disrupted. And maybe a few more facts. So there's 8 billion people on the planet that are getting older and sicker and costing society more. 30% of every piece of data that is stored around the world is healthcare related. Now think of the human body. In one cell, there's 3.2 billion pieces of individual letters in the DNA code, and there are 36 trillion cells in a human body.
Yep.
This industry is crying out for analytical tools. So when we talk about personalized medicine, how do you interpret the susceptibility of an individual to a disease? It's utterly dependent on AI models, and I love the phrase, we've not even scratched the surface yet. But we have first to assemble the data. And I think 5 years ago, when we tried to transform R&D in GSK, we wanted to turn GSK into a data company. So it was driven by data. We inverted the R&D model, which traditionally has been scientists or biologists doing experiments and then interpreting the data. Now, our data scientists using analytical tools, tell us biologists what experiments to do, and when you've done it, bring back the data. So biology today is a data collection exercise for the sole purpose of building these data sets to be able to interpret. So this is the most, I've been in this industry for 30 odd years. This is by far the most exciting time that we've got, because we can begin to do what you said, which is we can begin to link diseases to individuals and move towards prevention. If we wait to if we just treat sick people, you know, the healthcare costs will bring every developed country down.
So do you then recommend that all of us go and get a genetic testing screening? So that all that information is in the system, because that will be used.
It would be a good start. So I had my third grandchild was born 8 months ago, and I said to his parents, I said, I'm going to give your son a gift. And I gave him his genome.
Wow.
I had his whole genome sequenced at birth. And today they were able to say, well, there are 300 genetic diseases that we're able to say he hasn't got. Because most childhood genetic diseases turn up after 2 years or 18 months when, you know, the development isn't as expected. That's a record now that he'll have for the rest of his life. And so, yes, I would.
So do you think that this is going to be the trend, right, in the healthcare industry, where at birth, and you said something interesting, and I love this line, this was backstage, you said, from cradle to grave.
Yes. Yes.
We'll talk about that in just a bit. I want Khalfan to jump in on this, because I think you've been doing incredible work in Dubai generally and the UAE. And let's remember the UAE was the first country in the world to have an AI minister. The investment, the R&D spend within this space is quite dramatic. Give me a sense of the sectors that you're most excited about. And I love that you said that government is following the private sector, not the other way around.
Yes. So we've been asked this question so many times, what are the sectors? I'll give you a story, and then you tell me which sectors you think are relevant, okay? So let's imagine, and I think I've mentioned this maybe in a panel, and I'm not saying, God forbid, this doesn't happen to anyone, but you're asleep, okay? Your alarm rings, and the alarm rings and actually notifies you that it has recognized an irregular heartbeat. At the same time, it moved your meetings for you, it connected with your doctor, it sent the report to your doctor, it prepared your coffee, it booked a car for you, it shuffled your whole day without you even, you barely opened your eyes yet. So what does this mean? It means that, and this is, I'm not talking about 10 years from now. This is literally years, if even less, because this is basically a data dump of different sectors and components where you're actually aggregating everything together. Another example, I mean, what has been just mentioned, AI is not only on the production side at the moment, it's also on the analytical side of things, whether it comes to diagnosis. Even when you talk about climate, understanding with the climate challenge, how can AI really tell us what kind of solutions to achieve? So right now, AI is actually covering the analytical side, the build side, and the execution side. And I'll add to that, AI is also being applied to actually manage AI. And what do I mean by this? Deepfakes are things that we cannot detect. And now I'm covering your sector, which is mainly media. And I'm sure you know more than anyone that this sector will be disrupted royally, but we still need you. And I'll tell you where the angle about humans. So
I cannot be replaced by a robot.
Not at all, impossible. But I'm just saying that everything will be changed, and all sectors will be changed across. But to the comment that has been mentioned about the human angle, the human capital and the premium on human capital, like a gathering like this, will even become more valuable. You know how when they sell watches in the past, they say, oh, this is handmade versus manufacturers, and how there's a premium? Right now, the human premium will be there, and I'll come back to your R&D point, it's relevant, but human premium will be valuable across all board. We hear Elon Musk saying that there'll be supercomputers connected to AI, that at a point we will need no more jobs, basically, to that extent. We see Sam Altman talking about a 4-day working week. It's implemented now across many countries.
Iceland has already done that, by the way.
Yes, and the Emirate of Sharjah did it as well in the UAE. So I think the value of human capital will become much, much more valuable, which means that those human interactions will become even more relevant. Why? Because as much as technology is part of our DNA, we understand that the human drive it, and we are at risk of our mental well-being. We see well-being challenges, mental challenges, physical well-being. I mean, being in the gym and being more active. By the way, the Minister of Finance is my idol. He's in the gym at 4:30 a.m., so I try to follow his path. But activity is very important because this is what spurs innovation. So I think all sectors will be touched, and R&D, enabling R&D and human capital is the catalyst of any ecosystem at the moment.
Okay, so R&D spend in the UAE right now is 1.5% of GDP.
Combined, yes.
But you know you have to increase that,
Absolutely.
right? That's not enough.
That's nowhere close to us achieving what we want. We're targeting the 4s and the 5s percentages of GDP. Obviously, this will take time. I've had conversations. We started the R&D strategy at the Dubai level. The grant mechanisms are out already. We met all the universities in Dubai. Obviously, the challenges in the past, there used to be a mindset. Many governments in the past saw R&D as a write-off. Because of the risk profiling nature of R&D, a big chunk of those papers don't go anywhere. But the ones that go somewhere are the ones that create the innovation. And it's on the risk profiling perspective, it's even earlier than VC, right? So you're talking about the earlier white paper side of things where either a doctor or a student comes in with a paper. And what do you do with that paper? You need to inject it with the grant mechanism, which is what we have launched right now, and be patient with the system. And I'll wrap up by saying one last question. So one last point. I met a doctor in New York. I mentioned sports. I've done tons of surgery. So I met a doctor in New York and asked him, he lived in Dubai, in the UAE. And another venture capitalist that was with us in dinner asked me, why did you come to New York and London to do the surgery? I want to do it in the UAE. So I asked the doctor, I said, why don't you do your practice in the region? He said the region has everything, and it's moving in the right direction when it comes in R&D, because doctors would need that space to innovate and work on white papers. And this is the last step for them to actually consider that relocation, if you will. So I think there's a lot of movement. To your point, the percentages aren't there yet, but there's a massive push from leadership to complete the innovation cycle.
That's very good news. Caroline.
Eleni, I wanted to add to that point about the surgery. So I had both my knees treated with stem cell and PRP. And I had to pay for that out of my own pocket. I'm fortunate enough I could pay for that out of my own pocket. But it is that kind of research and access to that, and how we can democratize access to those sort of things that will lead to this thing around healthcare versus sick care. Right? Because that's exactly the point you made, John. Is like we see people for patient care. We don't see them as human care until they become really sick. So how can we build on some of that here?
So the one thing, His Excellency Falih said this morning that, and I love this, rising tide lifts all boats. And frankly, I wonder if we're going to create more inequality with AI. And the reason I say this, I had a fantastic conversation with Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University, and he said that the question is, can all the productivity we're getting from AI be shared equitably? Who's going to use it? Who's going to control it? Who's going to have access to it? And we know there's massive gaps that are occurring right now. So I wonder, Caroline, if you think what we're seeing right now is going to create a more equitable environment or a more unequal one?
I actually think it's going to create a more equal environment, and here's why. Just even from the impact we've had, we have announced actually we had an event, Google did, the AI Connect, our MENA AI Connect, just a few days ago in Dubai, and we announced a $15 million fund for an AI initiative to educate people in the region until by 2027. So that's with the 15 million in there. But we've also found that by also making sure we've created the tools to be available in Arabic, so Gemini is our suite of large language models. It recognizes 16 dialects. right? And so making sure that the technology can actually, be there, but working with state, local governments, and also private sector companies to have programs like Maharat Min Google, to get people to actually learn, use these technologies, learn the courses, understand what it can do, so that they can use these technologies to solve local problems for global reach.
Perfect. John, I want you to jump in here and tell me why this region is attractive for you right now in terms of AI investment, AI adoption.
Yeah, I think it's really attractive because I think we have to shift as an industry where we're selling products to where we're working with governments to help improve the foundation of health. And the things that are really attractive here is, number one, the use of technology in the system. It's already very, very high. Some of the most advanced hospital systems are here in this region. I visited last year the control room at the Ministry of Health in Riyadh. It was staggering in terms of being able to oversee the effectiveness of a system.
Firstly, I've never heard of a hospital having a control room.
I know.
That is incredible.
This is the hospital system. So this is every hospital. I mean, it's truly staggering.
Yeah.
But also, there's high incidences of diabetes here because of the changing diet patterns and so on. There's genetic diseases. So there's a big investment in genetics and the analytics. And so we're very excited about building collaborative partnerships across the region, and indeed doing more of our clinical work here, because you've got this technology foundation that enables to integrate all of the causes and effects that we can begin, and I hope to begin to able to interpret not just diseases at an individual level, but really where the system needs to go to, predictions of future risk, and intervening when those risk tolerances increase. So this region, I think, is very exciting. Plus, it's willing to invest, it's willing to take risks, and it's got a government that is ambitious.
And we've done quite a bit, to fast track even diabetes, detection in ophthalmology. The models and things we've built now can actually pick up very small dots even in just eye exams to identify if someone could be diabetic without them necessarily even having to give blood. So this is where the combination of industries, technology, healthcare, and specificity can really drive outcomes.
This is a great lineup of partners of how the partnership needs to work.
Indeed.
Okay, so Khalfan, I want you to jump in here in terms of the regulatory environment, where we stand in the region, and also for the UAE. And you almost mentioned something earlier where you said it's almost self-regulated, right? So one AI model can be monitoring another AI model. Tell me about what we're doing on the regulatory front, because as we're adopting more and companies are doing it, government level, company level, consumer level, everyone wants to know, is our data safe? Are we safe?
So again, I mean, this is probably the elephant in the room, the regulation, right? Because people first said, oh, is it funding? Do we have the right funding? But there's a lot of pools of capital when it comes to venture capital and granting mechanisms. They're all there. No matter how much you inject capital into innovation, if you don't create the clear pathway and a fast pathway for innovators, innovation will not succeed. I mean, those innovators usually, and most of the time, have extremely fast burn rates. So they need the investment on a fast basis. But more importantly, they want to make sure that they can implement those ideas on the ground, whether it's a tangible test in the likes of, I don't know, autonomous drone delivery solutions, for example. How can they test if they don't have the right place to physically test it and mitigate the risk? And you need to do that. How do you balance between the health and safety and ensuring that this is the right test? That's more on a tangible test. Looking at blockchain and crypto, how do you actually apply it when it comes to using it? We know it's the future, but do we know it's safe enough across sector? Can I actually guarantee that I can sell you my land plot using blockchain without any intermediaries? Theoretically, on blockchain, that's doable. Are we comfortable in using those platforms?
Yeah.
So the answer to your point is we have vehicles at a local, when I say local, as in at an emirate level versus a federal level, where we create a sandbox mentality. So we have a sandbox program at a Dubai level, and we have the regulations lab at the federal level. And the whole idea is, one, you get the right people in the room. And who are the right people? The government, the entrepreneurs, the private sector, the investor, and any relevant stakeholder that contribute to that space. If it's drone delivery, they have the civil aviation, and you name it. And then you agree on the outcome and the value, and you set a time frame, a quick one, to implement that test. And that test and that regulation will not only amend it for that innovator that came, this will be a pilot project that will be opened up for everyone. And when I say the secret sauce maybe of the region, and I see it here, and it's not a secret anymore, but I think maybe the special recipe we have here in this region is how close we are to leadership, to have change done. We sometimes joke around and say it's literally a WhatsApp away sometimes, where we can actually connect with the cabinet members to pick their brains on, is this actually doable or not?
I know, and it's such a good point, because it's policy continuity and security and certainty. I'm going to steal a couple of minutes, if I may, because I think this is important. Caroline, you know, whether we're talking about AI adoption, we can't adopt AI and these models if we don't have the hardware. We still need the minds. We still need all the chip makers. We need the rare earths. We need that value chain, whether we like it or not. NVIDIA is monopolizing the chips right now. Intel, I don't know if you saw that news, is coming off the Dow because it missed the train on creating the right chips and so forth. Is it a race on that front? And do you think the region should seriously be looking at production of chips?
So this is not a Google perspective. This is my personal view. It's my personal view. I think that it's the right time to be innovating in this sort of space. And so now I'll put my Google hat back on. Obviously, we have our own chips, our tensor processing units, and a lot of people know that we're also doing some of the work on quantum, and we've been being able to push some of the innovation from that perspective. But there was a company called Grok that was completely written off, when it first started, and everybody said they were wasting their time, they're not doing the right thing. But having chips that are very specific for use cases, being able to get these things processed out at the edge is going to be more important as we try to include the culture from different parts of the world in. And the reason I say that is edge solutions are going to have a very key role to play as things move forward. We're not just going to be doing fully centralized systems. It has to also do that. And so having chip makers who know how to make chips very specifically for the things that's supposed to do at the edge, like healthcare, is going to be really, really important.
Fantastic. A few seconds to you, John, to wrap up.
Well, I'd just like to pick up on the regulatory point, because I think it's another good advert for this region, because we have to move from regulation based on observational estimated data from data that is analytically derived based on real actual events. And I think I've had some of the best conversations with regulators in this region about how to build data-driven regulation as any part of the world. So I think we've got to crack regulation.
Fantastic. Well, I've got good news for everyone, and everyone's worried the Pandora's box is open, genie's out of the bottle, how do we put it back in? My daughter didn't want to do her homework one day, and I said, you've got to do your homework because you're going to be competing with robots because they're going to take over the world. She said, Mama, robots are not going to take over the world. I said, well, why not? She says, because all you have to do is turn off the button and then it dies. So don't be ridiculous.
So can I add to this? Sorry, quick story. So Michio Kaku, who's a known futurist, we actually asked him this question, and he came on stage and he said, to your exact point, he said, robots are becoming so smart, and they're improving and they're doing everything, but we have a button that we can switch them off. But then he said, what if they become too smart that they stop us from stopping them?
Oh, there we go. That should have been my follow-up line to my daughter, but that was from my 7-year-old, so I leave you with that message.
They will.
Caroline, John, Khalfan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fantastic conversation. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.